Here is a little more college level example. This comes actually from a college textbook. It's a health textbook. In this particular chapter, it's discussing public health. And in this particular section of the chapter on public health, it's talking about public psychological health and what happens in communities that unfortunately have to experience a lot of prejudice and hatred and those kind of things, and what that does to people's mental health. Okay, this one I don't have color-coded quite so much because I want you to start really seeing the organization even when it's just in black and white. But I do have the topic sentence highlighted for you. So here's the telling statement first, and then the part of the paragraph that's in white will all be showing. As the population of the U.S. becomes more diverse and people of color and differing cultures and lifestyles become more visible, there has been a corresponding rise in intolerance. So you're telling me that intolerance in some ways is on the rise. That's a clear enough statement, but it's going to be more compelling to me, more interesting, and actually I'm more likely to believe you if you don't just tell me that that's true, you need to show me that that's true. So we need specific supporting details. First specific supporting detail: continuing anti-Semitic acts, Japanese bashing, gay bashing, and racially motivated hate crimes indicate that intolerance is still smoldering in our nation. That's already a list of 4 kinds of intolerance already mentioned in that first supporting detail. By the way, anti-Semitic, if you're not familiar with that term, means anti-Jewish. They're going to continue the list of examples of intolerance. Neo-Nazi activities, Ku Klux Klan and skinhead demonstrations, and the growth of extremist religious and cult activity are signs that bigotry and hatred are still present. We're going to continue the list even further. Cross burnings, religious desecrations, death threats, and actual murders indicate the seriousness of these social problems. I've lost count, but that's a good 7 or 8 examples, maybe more, of intolerance, intolerant kinds of actions. I want you to notice what the paragraph's doing here, because this is one of the things that bumps this paragraph up to the college level, that makes it a little more sophisticated than the last one we looked at. We're about 3/4 of the way through the paragraph. It's going to stop all the showing right now and do something that we haven't mentioned yet. It is imagining, it's like the writer of this paragraph is imagining that at this point in the paragraph, the reader is saying this: okay, you told me that the intolerance is on the rise, then you showed me 7, 8, 9 examples of intolerance. So what? Not so what like I don't care, but so what, like what's your point? Why are you asking me to look at these things? These things are really not very pleasant to look at. Why are you directing my eyes to these kind of hateful, intolerant behaviors? What is your point? That's how the paragraph is going to end. Its last few sentences will be making its point. Right? So that's a good model to keep in mind as you're constructing paragraphs. Tell first in your topic sentence, then show in the main part of your supporting details, and then as you get towards the end of your paragraph, answer your reader's question, so what? What's your point? Okay. So this writer's point was this: hatred and bigotry divide communities and shatter the social, educational, legal, political, and economic bonds between people. Such actions lead to deterioration in our spiritual, social, and psychological health. So we had been discussing unity before we looked at these examples, and we said that unity is kept when you state your main idea in that topic sentence, and then all the supporting details show that one main idea, right? So really kind of the topic sentence and the supporting details match in the sense that they deal with the one main idea, okay? If some of those supporting details strayed away from that main idea, we would say that that paragraph has a problem with unity and needs to be revised, okay? College students aren't like children. Children might have these sort of wild changes in topic. You know, they're writing about Barack Obama, then all of a sudden, with no warning, they're writing about basketball, something like that. Oh, 93 students don't do that. What we have to watch out for is a subtle kind of drift. Each sentence just drifts a little further away from the way that you stated the main idea at the beginning of the paragraph, and a little further away, and a little further away, until you get to the end of the paragraph. And it's a very closely related idea, but it's different from how you started out, right? That's something that you look for when you're revising. You're going to revise for unity. You're going to make sure that every single supporting detail directly supports that main idea, which you probably stated as your first sentence in the paragraph. Okay? Here is a very simple example. I'll let you read it on your own to yourself. I've sneaked in just a little bit of disunity. I'll bet you can find it, right? And then we'll just talk about our options for revising this to get that disunity out of there and tighten up the unity of the paragraph. So I'll give you just a minute to read this to yourself. So if we're checking for disunity, the first thing we would want to know is, well, what is the main idea? So we would look for a topic sentence. The first place that I would look for a topic sentence would be the very first sentence. Does that sound like a telling statement that tells me what the main idea is? The American breakfast has changed dramatically in the past few decades. Yes, so I expect that all the supporting details will all be about the American breakfast and how it's changed recently. I'm sure that you can find a supporting detail in there that's closely related to that idea, but not exactly the idea. And it's there, right? The paragraph in a subtle way just kind of drifted into lunch and dinner. We're still talking about the American diet and how it's changed, but that's not exactly the boundaries that this writer set up in the topic sentence. The boundaries you set up in the topic sentence have to be respected throughout the whole rest of the paragraph. So the easiest way to revise this, of course, would be just get rid of those sentences that's in that purple color, right? There's plenty of detail about breakfast and how it's changed that the paragraph doesn't really seem to be harmed very much if you took away these couple of sentences about lunch and dinner. That's the best way to revise this one. Just for the sake of discussion, though, just in theory, you have another option. If you really wanted that bit about lunch and dinner in there, what you could do is go back and adjust your topic sentence and broaden the boundaries a little bit. So instead of saying the American breakfast has changed dramatically, maybe say the American diet or American meals, right? Or American food, right? Broaden the boundaries so it can include lunch and dinner. But I still don't think that's the best choice here because you have so much about breakfast and so little about lunch and dinner. I think our first revision was the better choice. Just get rid of the words in purple. Okay. One way that some people like to check for unity is to temporarily, just in their mind, not on the page, turn the topic sentence into a question and then read through the supporting details and make sure every single question directly answers that. Every single detail directly answers that question. Right? So the question here would be, how has the American breakfast changed? Right? And as you read through the details, by the time you got to lunch and dinner, you'd realize I'm not exactly answering that same question anymore. So some people find that technique useful. Coherence requires a little more discussion. Coherence is all about the organization, or even a better word, the arrangement of those supporting details. We've already learned from our writing process lecture that we never want to just make up our content as we go along. Everything is planned out very carefully ahead of time. The place where you're really making those decisions about what bit of content is going to go where is when you're outlining, right? So you have already decided how you're going to arrange the supporting details. And there's a clear reason why the first detail is first and why the second detail is second and the third detail is third. Ideally, what we're looking for here is a progression that feels like the way a person actually thinks. We think in associations, right? One thought leads us to another thought, which leads naturally to another thought, which leads naturally to another thought. That's the kind of process you're trying to imitate on the page. You don't want your supporting details to just sound like a list. You certainly don't want it to sound like a random list where the items could have come in just any old order and it doesn't really matter, because that will feel like it's just sort of being made up off the top of your head as you go along, right? It would be better to plan out the coherence, to plan out the arrangement of those supporting details carefully first, okay? Two ways that you create coherence. You can pick up on a traditional arrangement that's already been in use for a long time. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. You just pick up on one of the traditional ones. We call those logical patterns of development or patterns of arrangement, right? And just use one of those. We'll look at some examples in just a second. And then pepper your paragraph with lots of transitions as you move from one detail into the next. There's a transition there that guides the reader and makes it really clear what this detail that you're moving into has to do with the one that you just left. So it connects them. The word cohere really means to stick together. So that's what will make one detail stick to the next one. And it's in a logical kind of way that sounds like an actual person thinking, rather than just sort of a random list that was just sort of thrown down on the page in any old order. The best analogy that I can come up with is it's like arranging furniture in a room. Arranging supporting details in a paragraph is like arranging the furniture in a room. Imagine you're moving to a new apartment or a new house. The moving men or your friends, whatever, have their furniture and boxes and all on the truck. When they get them into the house, they're just really kind of just dumping it anywhere, right? Maybe they put the couch, facing into a corner, and the coffee table all the way across the room, and a lamp over here, and a TV over there, right? And it's all just this haphazard sort of mess. Of course, you're not just going to leave everything where they just happen to dump it. You're not going to leave your content in the same order that it just happened to pop into your mind when maybe you were brainstorming. You're going to arrange the furniture. There's not just one correct way to put that couch. Maybe the couch would be nice on this wall, maybe it'd be nice over there, right? But certain pieces do seem to belong together. Most people would put a coffee table right in front of the couch and not across the room, right? Most people would have a couch or a chair maybe facing the fireplace or the TV and not facing into a corner, right? So there's some arrangements that make sense, some that don't really make sense, but you come in and you make some choices. There's not just one way to arrange the furniture, but it doesn't mean that just any old haphazard way would work, okay? Same thing with arranging the supporting details in a paragraph. When we talk about traditional patterns of arrangement, I bet a lot of you have some kind of little table next to your bed, right? It's not like a strict rule, but you'll see that arrangement of table next to bed over and over and over and over. Why? Because it's so useful. People want somewhere to put their glasses or a book or an alarm clock or a glass of water, right? And so it's a traditional pattern to put those two pieces together. You see traditional arrangements in paragraphs too. Certain kind of groupings that we see over and over just because they're useful, just because they make sense. So it's worth learning some of those so you can use them. This is just reinforcing that when are you doing this furniture arranging, so to speak? When are you deciding what content will go where in your paragraph? When you're outlining. That's the time when you're making the decision, not when you're actually drafting. By the time you draft your first draft of the paragraph, you've already decided on all the arrangement. You're just following your plan.